All right, so we are now live over on both Instagram as well as here in the Zoom world. And today our topic is making medical astrology work for you. As you all know, one of my primary areas of focus for the last, I don't even know how long, has been specifically sharing more about our medical astrology offerings here at Oraculos with our wider astrological community. And a big part of that is because concrete astrology is what really guides us and where we find ourselves most rooted here at Oraculos. And independent of practicing concrete astrology, I'm really not fascinated or amazed by other astrological approaches. And when I say that, I want to be very clear to clarify that a concrete approach to astrology can be applied to any astrological approach whatsoever. So when I say concrete astrology, I'm not saying that other forms of astrology can't be concrete, but I'm saying that my specific orientation as far as astrology is concerned is to make sure that I am using my ability to read a chart to say as many clear and definitive and concrete things to a person as possible about the actual events that have occurred within their lives. As we know, there is nothing quite as concrete or definitive as our own health and well-being within this lifetime. And to this end, medical astrology really became the place where I wanted to root my efforts as an astrologer to a very large degree. And not just there, but definitely medical astrology became the container for that. And initially, when I started to study medical astrology, or when I made attempts to move into the world of medical astrology, I found that it was very difficult because for as many medical astrologers as there are, we have just as many different approaches to medical astrology. And one of the things that struck me quite early on in my medical astrology endeavors was the vast disparity that existed between one astrologer and another, or one group of medical astrologers and others, in relation to the correspondences between the signs of the zodiac and the human body. Now, for me, that felt pretty basic. It felt like if we were going to create any sort of system of astrology, we would fundamentally have a very clear and rational way of assigning signs of the zodiac to the various zones of the body. But it seemed as if you would read, or I would read, Max Heindel and be taken in one direction in terms of the signs of the zodiac and how they corresponded to the body. And then I'd pick up C.C. Zane, whose real name was Albert Benjamin, and see that he had something else to say about the topic that was different from Heindel. And then I would pick up Richard Saunders, writing in the 18th century, and see that he has something completely different to say. And then all of the contemporary medical astrologers in current practice now all had varying allocations between the signs of the zodiac and the human body. And for this reason, I put it down. I put it down indefinitely because I didn't really want to be a part of the chaos. Astrology by itself already has enough necessary chaos, and I didn't want to be a part of what felt to me like a very real level of unnecessary chaos in terms of this whole signs of the zodiac situation and the human body. Now, another part of why this was important to me was because I didn't know that another type of medical astrology existed. I didn't know that there was a medical astrology that operated itself purely through the planets and the combinations of planets. And so it took me a long time to come to terms with even wanting to practice medical astrology at all, because all I saw and all I thought medical astrology was for a very long time was this emphasis on the signs of the zodiac. And if you, like me, have the sun in Taurus, then you need to protect your throat. Or if you have the sun in Scorpio, then you need to protect your genitalia. Because that was pretty much what I heard, especially amongst a lot of my colleagues who practice and teach medical astrology today. This very strong emphasis on the sun sign. And by extension, this very strong emphasis on the rising sign. And by extension, this very strong emphasis on the moon sign. I found within medical astrology a type of astrology that I didn't even like to practice in my normal astrological work, much less medical astrology specifically. And I found this very strong emphasis on the signs of the zodiac. And I said, well, Mychal, if that's just what it is, then you'll practice that way, because why would you try to reinvent the wheel? And then I eventually stumbled upon the works of Reinhold Eberton and his book, The Combinations of Stellar Influences. And when I read that book, and I don't really think anybody has ever read that book from cover to cover, but when I opened the book and I started to explore some of the references in that book, it made me realize that this was powerful stuff. Not only was it powerful stuff, but it was a version or an approach to astrology that was right up my alley, because there wasn't this overemphasis on the signs of the zodiac. There was this very specific emphasis on the combinations of stellar influences, the planets within our charts, and how those planets within our charts inform our concrete realities within our lives. And this was a huge game changer for me. And to this day, it is still quite a huge game changer. Hi there to everybody who's joining over on Instagram. Welcome, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. Please feel free to send us your questions in the comment section if you like. Also, for those of you who are joining us specifically on Zoom, if you don't already follow us, please make sure to do so over on Instagram at Oraculos Astrology, so that you can be a part of this bi-wheel of relationships. So we are on Instagram at Oraculos Astrology, and we're also on YouTube at the Oraculos Podcast. So this was my foray into medical astrology, and that was my disillusionment with medical astrology, and ultimately my enlightenment, as it were, as far as medical astrology was concerned, because I found within the writings of Eberton, and even earlier than the writings of Eberton, I found within the writings of Alfred Witte, this approach to not just medical astrology, but to astrology in general, that was planet forward, and that was planet centric, and that focused on the combinations of stellar influences within our birth charts, to the exclusion of a lot of what we had come to rely upon within the signs of the zodiac. And that was electrifying for me. And so that began my particular endeavors in medical astrology. And I feel like a lot of my work has taken off from where the work of the early cosmobiologists and Uranian astrologers left off at. And it ultimately resulted in me writing and publishing this book, The New Western Medical Astrology, Pathways Towards the Cosmos Indwelling. So once again, if you haven't gotten yourself a copy of this book yet, please make sure to go and do so. You can purchase one over on Amazon. So that was my medical astrology shtick. And since then, I went on to perform a very sweeping investigation and research project on medical astrology, purely based on my own observations. One of the things that I have been very keen on has been making sure that the things that we teach at Oraculos is born out of our efforts as oraculites. So I've never really wanted to use a textbook from a contemporary colleague of mine, because I really wanted for the astrology that I taught to be an example of the astrology that I practiced. And insofar as the astrology that I practiced was quite singular, it only made sense for the astrology that I taught to come directly from me as well. So that is how this book came about, The New Western Medical Astrology. And actually, retrospectively, I remember I got a reading from an astrologer, a very well-known astrologer who I trust emphatically with my natal chart. And he said to me, Mychal, in the year 2025, you are going to do something completely new and completely different and completely unique for astrology. In the year 2025, you're going to create something new that's never been created before. And I was like, this is dumb. Like, what is this? Like, what has not already been created within astrology? What can I contribute that is of that magnitude that it would essentially make a mark as being this brand new thing? And I went through the process of writing this book, and I also went through the process of publishing this book. And when I held the book in my hands and I saw the title of the book, The New Western Medical Astrology, I remembered that meeting that I had with this astrologer. And then I reopened our recording of that meeting. And I heard him say, Mychal, in 2025, you're going to create something new in astrology that's never been created before. And it sent chills down my spine because at the time that he and I had that reading, which was probably in 2020, I had no context that this would become such a central part of my life's work. Now, what is my life's work? And also, what is medical astrology? As far as I'm concerned, medical astrology is the study of the forces that support and sustain human vitality as they are depicted through the birth chart. That's what we're doing as medical astrologers. We are essentially studying the forces that sustain and that maintain human vitality in general as those forces are depicted within our natal horoscopes. The magnitude of this is great in some ways, but at the same time, it's a kind of basic extension of what we already think is possible as astrologers. As astrologers, we believe it to be possible that the birth chart has the ability to describe every major concrete event that has ever occurred within our lives. If that's the case, then it isn't that far a stretch for us to realize that in the same way as the birth chart has the ability to essentially describe all of our life events, it should also have the ability to describe our foundational constitution within this lifetime. And one of the places where we find this being spoken about the most is in traditional astrology, because in traditional astrology, we don't really find a reading being given without that reading beginning with this understanding of the general constitution of the native. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term native, a native is anybody who a birth chart is belonging to. So this is our very first starting point when it comes to astrology in general. We want to understand what is the general constitution of this person. What is the vehicle or the physical vehicle of the human body that this person has incarnated into this life within this lifetime? And how can the birth chart serve as a reliable measuring device to measure the level of intrinsic vitality that that person has entered this lifetime with? These are the things that we do within a medical astrology reading. And so to start off the medical astrology assessment, we start at the beginning of the birth chart. And the beginning of the birth chart is the first house. So for those of you who don't know, at the Oraculos School of Astrology, our readings begin through an assessment of the first house and its ruler. And the actual order for that would be, we study the ruler of the ascendant, the house location of the ruler of the ascendant, aspects to the rule of the ascendant, planets in the first house, aspects to the first house cusp. This information gives us everything that we need to understand the personality of the native. But beyond understanding the personality of the native, it also provides us everything that we need in order to understand the vehicle that houses that personality. And the vehicle that houses that personality is always going to be the physical body. And not necessarily just the body, also the mind. You know, when it comes to medical astrology, for a long time, we tended to think of the body as being the be-all and the end-all as far as our health was concerned, but also our mind, the mind indwelling, and the ability for our mind to also fall into states of illness and distress should also be assessed from the perspective of medical astrology. And this is one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize within my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, because after I had gone through all the systems of the human body, the integumentary system, the skeletal system, the urinary system, the male and female reproductive system, after I had done all of this work, I fundamentally wanted to know what is the piece that I haven't touched. And it became very evident to me that I hadn't dealt at all with anything having to do with our mental well-being. And so in the book, after we go through all of the systems of the body, I then go into the exploration of our mental well-being and our mental health and the astrological factors that impact that mental well-being and that mental health. So those were some of the things that were essentially important to me. Now, I'm going to ask Marlena to just pause the recording for 1 second because I need to. So I was saying that when it comes to assessing who we are, we do that primarily through a study of the ascendant, the rule of the ascendant, planets in the first house, all these things. And the reason for this is because the ancients always held that the ascendant didn't just represent our mind, but it also represented our bodies. Now, within the 21st century, we have such a strong distinction between what is mind and what is body that wants to take a look at our birth chart and specifically go after finding the signatures of the mind or the signatures that define our mental health versus the signatures that define health within some other part of our constitution. But this idea of there being this distinct separation between the mind and the body isn't really something that we find within traditional astrology at all. And I'm reminded that in Japanese, there really is an emotional heart versus the mind, as in the thinking mind. So if you were to speak Japanese and you were to ask a Japanese person, hey, how do you think about this thing? The person would tell you how he or she thinks about that thing. But if you were to then say, hey, how do you feel about this thing? It would perplex that person because there isn't this distinction in Japanese culture and or even in Japanese language that we have within English, for example, where we can clearly define that my thought process about something is different from my emotional felt process about something. So in Japan, you don't think or feel. In Japan, you think, feel. And similarly, from the perspective of medical astrology, there isn't this clear distinction between the mind and the body. There is simply the body-mind. And when we understand that we're dealing with the body-mind, it automatically allows us to also understand that we are foundationally assessing imprints on our health that don't just affect us at one level of being, but they affect us at all levels of our being. One of the quotes that I love from the Corpus Hermeticum is that few are the elements that God used to create the heavens and the earth. But even though they are few, they are strong, mighty, and beautiful. When we think about this from an astrological perspective, we have this idea of the planets, for example, representing a very limited palette that we have with which to describe everything that occurs within our world. The planets are meant to describe our thoughts, our feelings, our family members, our friends, our bank account balance, our career, our pets, things that make us sick, things that make us healthy, our parents, our spouses, our higher education. All of these things are meant to be represented by the planets. And then within another sphere of astrology, those same planets are then meant to represent the ruler of a particular country, the wealth of a particular nation, the people, the populace of a particular nation. So these planets have to work double and triple and quadruple and quintuple. I don't even know if quintuple is a word, but quintuple amounts simply to describe everything within our known universe. And they do so extraordinarily well because few are the seeds from which God created this world. But even though they are few, they are strong and they are mighty and they are beautiful. So that is why the planets represent such a strong area of focus for me. And that's why when we're assessing the body of a person, we also take that as an opportunity to assess how those physiological impacts might also impact or might also be reflective of larger things occurring within that person's soul and psyche, larger things occurring within that person's personality. So that's the first thing. Our very first step into giving a medical astrology reading is to understand who the person is. Because If we don't understand who the person is, we really can't do any work at all. This came to me when I was hired to give a medical astrology reading to someone. Now, at the time, I had only ever given medical astrology readings to women. And so my languaging and my approach was very much rooted within things that afflict women's health. And then one day, a guy came to me for a reading. He was referred to me by his spouse. And on an energetic level, there was something about it that felt uncomfortable to me because, once again, I had only been accustomed to working with women in general. So there was a growth edge that I wasn't anticipating at all. And then, not only that, but there was also the fact that I just didn't know how to look at a chart from the perspective of men's medical health. And I think a big part of that is because men tend not to be as forthcoming with their health issues, particularly with their reproductive health issues, than women are. And so, for me, I had no context for what some issue within a man's reproductive system looks like because that just wasn't within the scope of my practice. Today, I do. And within this book, The New Western Medical Astrology, I really went to great lengths to go out and collect charts of men, whether I got them from those men themselves, from their husbands, from their wives, from whosoever. I collected the charts of men in order to really have an understanding and also in order to really set a foundation for what it looks like to work with the male horoscope from the perspective of medical astrology. And so I didn't feel as if I did a very good reading. And actually, at the end of that reading, I realized that I was leaning far more on my larger skill set as an astrologer, as a pretty good natal astrologer, and I wasn't at all leaning on my skill set as a medical astrologer. And I think that this is something that a lot of us tend to do when we are confronted with having to integrate some new astrological skill into our practice. Oftentimes, our defaults are those things that we've always done. So I find this a lot when students come and study natal astrology with me and they hear, we're not talking about the signs of the zodiac, we're not even talking about the rising sign. There is oftentimes such cognitive dissonance around that for people that they scramble and try to figure out how to exist in this new space with me. And ultimately, after spending 14 weeks, 16 weeks studying with me, when they go back into the world, their astrology once again regains the shape of sun, moon, and rising astrology, which I've seen from time to time. And it's always fascinated me that you could learn something that is distinctly different and also learn something that distinctly works in a more effective way and still default to something that doesn't work. But I think that's a human condition. We all tend to default to the thing that's comfortable, especially when the thing that works a little bit better is something that requires a little bit more effort on our parts. We like to do the thing that represents effortless effort, as opposed to the thing that represents effortful effort. And so our starting point is this piece of the soul and psyche, because after I was done with that reading, I sat down with myself and I said, Mychal, you really fudged that one pretty badly. You really didn't do your best service to this person from a medical astrology perspective. What could you have done better? And that's when I came up with our four-pronged approach to medical astrology that we use here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. So the four prongs of this approach are, first of all, soul and psyche, identifying the personality of the native from their birth chart. Because there are many things that manifest within our physiological constitution that are direct reflections of things that are first manifested within our psychological constitution. So the very first thing that we look for is soul and psyche. What are the elements of my personality within my birth chart? Because just by coming into the world and being who we are, we automatically come into the world and take upon ourselves certain qualities that are not necessarily the healthiest, or we lean into certain elements of ourselves that represent sources of excess and sources of overdoing something within our lives. And no excess is healthy at all. Not even excessively leaning into that part of you that you know is really, really, really you. So for example, Martian people, And we always pick on Martian people. But Martian people represent people who are confident and action-oriented and independent, and people who are going places. And oftentimes they're speeding to those places because that speed is oftentimes justified by the outcome. And even when that speed is not justified by the outcome, the Martian person still feels as if I just go a little bit faster, then maybe the next outcome will be better than the last outcome in which I crashed my vehicle, because things happen to everybody. So the lesson to be learned from me speeding isn't not to speed. The lesson to be learned from me speeding is to speed more effectively. That's a Martian dilemma within this lifetime. And that Martian dilemma is directly born out of who that Martian person is by themselves. So even without talking about aspects to the Mars or afflictions to the Mars, simply by a person being who they are, simply by you and I being who we are, we already come into the world manifesting something that is out of balance. And our job as astrologers, particularly medical astrologers, is to teach people how to move back into a state of homeostasis, or back into a state of their natural balance from which true health and vitality arises. So as I sat there, quite disconcerted because of my poor performance, I realized that the first thing that I would have done, had I been able to do it again, was I would start with this assessment of soul and psyche. And then from the assessment of soul and psyche, which is what I do to this day when I have readings with clients, I always start with an assessment of soul and psyche. And then after that, I automatically go into an assessment of the general constitution of that person. Because we cannot begin to talk about what is wrong with a person before we understand what is manifesting within that person's general constitution, within their general framework within this lifetime. So as a result of that, the very next thing that we do after soul and psyche is we go into a discussion of the general constitution of the native. And historically speaking, our understanding of our general constitution comes primarily from the luminaries. And we often use the sun as the universal significator of men within the charts of men, and the moon as the universal significator of women within the charts of women. And so we go about an investigation of the luminaries, and we also go about an investigation of the ruler of the ascendant, because once again, the rule of the ascendant does give us vital information when it comes to our soul and psyche and personality, but it also gives us information when it comes to our overall understanding of our baseline constitutional vitality within this lifetime. So, sun, moon, and the rule of the ascendant are the elements that we would assess next. Now, something that I will share with you that I think will be of automatic usefulness for you within your overall astrological practice is, and I'm not saying this because I wrote the book, but I think that this book, The New Western Medical Astrology, is a powerful tool in terms of helping you understand, first and foremost, how do we actually go about understanding the planetary combinations that we find within our charts. That's the very first thing. And I think that this book, which is all of 680 something pages, is made completely useful by the fact that in the appendix of this book, I go through all of the over 78 planetary combinations, and I show how they manifest not only physiologically within our physical bodies, but I also show how they manifest psychologically and sociologically within the world at large. And the book that gave me this inspiration to do this was very largely The Combinations of Stellar Influences by Reinhold Eberton. So I would highly suggest that you all buy yourself a copy of The New Western Medical Astrology, as well as the combination, let me hold it up, The New Western Medical Astrology, as well as the combination of stellar influences, or rather the combinations of stellar influences, and use those books as a means of helping your mind to think about planetary combinations. Because when we assess the luminaries and the rule of the ascendant, we are only assessing them based on the combinations of the planets that they find themselves in aspects to. So for example, when I'm looking at somebody with Sun Saturn, I'm not necessarily looking at the qualities of the sun per se, but I'm looking at how does Saturn influence this gentleman's sun and how is that reflected in his overall constitution. Similarly, when I'm looking at the chart of a woman and I see that she has Moon Saturn, surely Moon Saturn by itself also has some level of potent information within it that is worthy of our attention. But Moon Saturn is also signifying within the chart of a woman that there is some Saturn-based issue that she needs to be addressing within this lifetime, whether that's an issue with the skeletal system, whether that's an issue with her skin, whether that's an issue with just her overall vitality and health and well-being in general. Moon Saturn is going to indicate that there is some chronic health concern that she needs to address within this lifetime in much the same way that Sun Saturn does the same thing within the charts of men. And finally, when we take a look at the ruler of the ascendant and Saturn, I'm not necessarily looking at that as the ruler of the ascendant per se, but I'm looking at that as L1, Lord 1, in hard aspect with Saturn, in which case, whatever that planet represents gets thrown out the window, and I simply focus on the influences of Saturn on the body of that person. What I mean by this is if somebody has Scorpio rising and resultantly has Mars as the ruler of their ascendant, in speaking about their general constitution, I'm not going to speak about Mars, Saturn. What does Mars and Saturn mean as a combination? Mars, Saturn, for example, could mean muscular fatigue or muscular wear out or burning out of ourselves in general, or not having enough vital fuel or having low immunity, all of these things, because Mars is largely representing the fires of life. The ancients thought that fire was most synonymous with life, and they thought that non-fire, particularly water and earth, were more synonymous with death. Therefore, when we have the vital flames of Mars being completely subjugated to the cold, oppressive nature of Saturn, then we don't actually have circumstances that support health within the life of a person. Rather, we have circumstances that support diminished health within the life of that person in general. Now, this is my assessment of Mars and Saturn as a combination, what they mean. However, if that Mars is also the ruler of the ascendant, in my brain, I have to create a split between me speaking about that person having L1 square Saturn, and I have to be able to describe that fully because that is vital information from a medical astrology perspective. And then once that's done, then I have to go into describing what it means for that person to have Mars Saturn. So L1 Saturn is one type of delineation. Ruler of the ascendant plus Saturn represents one type of delineation. With the ruler of that ascendant being Mars, we can look at Mars Saturn as another level of delineation. So what do we have? We have L1 Saturn giving me vital information about this person's basic constitution. And then after we're done looking at Mars through the specific lens of Mars being the ruler of the ascendant, then we look at that Mars as Mars pure and simple. And then Mars Saturn begins to contain another level of information that we can add to the information that we initially said about L1 and Saturn. If this is confusing, I've explained all of this in far greater detail within my book, The New Western Medical Astrology. And also, as you all know, we have our upcoming Medical Astrology Preliminary course, which starts October 20th. And I would sincerely love to see as many of you there as possible, because medical astrology is literally the vanguard and on the cutting edge of what a powerful astrological practice looks like, in my opinion. Without medical astrology, we would be stuck with an astrology that continues to tell me about my personality, and probably we'd even have an astrology that tells me about my finances and all of these other areas of my life. But we wouldn't have an astrology that tells me about the parts of my life that is most intimate to me and most nearest and dearest to my heart, and that is my physical well-being. Because if I don't have physical well-being, and if I don't have a way of measuring that physical well-being within my life, then it doesn't matter if I have the greatest husband in the world. If I don't have a physical body that has the ability or the stamina or the vitality to be in a reciprocal relationship with that person, It doesn't matter if I'm the richest person in the world if I don't have health as a baseline of my wealth within this lifetime, because our health is truly our wealth. So as astrologers, it's important for us to have tools by which we can understand the health and vitality of not only other people, I think in medical astrology, we find something that is very, very true in general. And it's the thing that people say to you when you go on the airplane, where they say, put on your life vest first before you put on the life vest of somebody else. Now, me being the sort of person I am, whenever I hear that, it kind of makes me uncomfortable because I think to myself, oh my God, but it's my sister, it's my nephew, it's my brother-in-law. Oh my God, I want to go and help them. But we cannot help others if we haven't first learned how to help and heal ourselves. And so medical astrology gives us a context for how to do that work within our own lives. And I think that that is powerful beyond measure, because it's important for us to be able to look at ourselves and do all of the checkups that we need to do to ensure that we are living in a space of optimal health, whether that's going and seeing our primary care provider, whether that's going and seeing our acupuncturist, our herbalist, our whoever. It's important for us to do all of those things, but it's also important for us to look in the mirror. It's of vital importance for us to look in the mirror on a daily basis. And who knows, fine, maybe it's not vitally important for us to look in the mirror on a daily basis, but it is vitally important for us to look in the mirror at least sometimes, so that we can see who we are, and so that we can see, oh my God, I have these puffy eyes. That means I didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe I need to get some more sleep. Or, oh my God, my skin feels bloated and itchy and irritated. Maybe it's because I had that gluten last night and I wasn't supposed to have it. And I didn't know that this is how I looked just walking around my life. But now that I look at myself in the mirror, I see that I'm deeply unwell. So that's what we do with the physical mirror. But what I'm suggesting is that we also use our birth chart as a mirror that reflects back to us the state of our foundational health and well-being and vitality within this lifetime. So even if you have no intention of ever taking medical astrology into your client practice, I still think that it is extraordinarily important for us to be able to take these principles of medical astrology into our own self-reflection through our own natal charts, because powerful information is there for us to uncover. Now, somebody asked in the group chat whether or not we take declination into consideration. We most definitely take declination into consideration, which brings me to my next point. Exactly, and somebody's saying I really want to use it for myself, my family first. It is vitally important for us to have tools to be of assistance, for us to have tools to be of help and service to others. Right now, I'm not going through the best moments in the world in terms of my digestive system, but I have the perspective of knowing what my chart looks like to know why this might be an issue for me within this current moment. So it doesn't feel comfortable. However, I know that there is a certain way that I am meant to live in order to avoid some of the pitfalls that exist within my chart. And I know for a fact that I haven't been living in those ways. For example, you see my chart and you say, this person really shouldn't be eating any form of dairy. This person shouldn't even look at a cow. And there I am every single day of my life, looking at all the cows that pass by in the world, in my dreams, on Instagram. I'm a big cow follower on all of the things. And the reality is I shouldn't be looking at any cow at all, because dairy is foundationally antithetical to my constitution. And this is something that you see in my chart automatically. It's pretty stressful how accurate it is, but it is definitely accurate. And so now today I did this whole binge shopping thing. So I went to Whole Foods and I bought 4 grocery bags full of fruits and vegetables, which is also a thing that I do. I go to the opposite extreme, but that's not such a bad extreme to go to, because I feel as if I definitely am needing to reset my physical constitution, and I know no better way of doing that than through fruits and vegetables. And after that reset, I'm going to look at my chart again and see how can I live in better harmony with the chart that is present in the front of me. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, whenever we find ourselves facing extraordinary challenges within our lives, it's probably because we aren't finding ways to live more harmoniously with our natal promise. So the feeling of rolling a boulder uphill, the feeling of doing things that deplete our vitality, the feeling of being in a situation that is not good for us is foundationally because we are not living based on the wisdom of our natal promise. And it's no different within the context of medical astrology. There's a question on Instagram coming in from Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon, I love you, as you know. Is this a course we can participate in if we aren't already practicing astrologers? Do we need any specific foundation first? That's a great question. One of the things that I think people just should know in general is how to identify aspects. If you can identify aspects within a chart, you've won the battle as far as I'm concerned. If you know how to look at a chart and specifically identify the aspects that are present within that chart, you have already won at the game of life of being an astrologer. So that, for me, is really the only prerequisite that I ever establish. Because I think that on top of that basis, we add techniques. So on top of that basis, we add solar returns or lunar returns or whatever. But the baseline of all of that is our ability to foundationally identify aspects. It's the only thing. So if you know how to identify aspects, how to look at a chart and tell that a square is a square, and how to look at a chart and tell that an opposition is an opposition, that's really all you need in order to benefit from a course like this, because the rest of the learning that occurs within that course will come from the course itself, if that makes sense. So that's my forever answer for anything that people want to learn from me. And I think my student at Oraculos may not feel as if that is the most honest assessment of the only prerequisites that we have. But ultimately, in my mind, I know that I am a very skillful teacher, and I know what I can do with somebody who has a baseline understanding of aspects. And if you have a baseline understanding of aspects, I could teach you everything that is within me to teach you. If the aspects thing is fuzzy, we have many systems of support at the Oraculos School of Astrology for you to learn how to do the aspects in a better way. And one of the courses or one of the webinars that we're going to be coming out with within the next few weeks in any event is a webinar on the aspects, how to specifically rapidly identify aspects within the chart. So if you wanted to join this course and you don't have the ability to identify aspects, then I would still suggest you join the course because I'll teach as we go along. And we also have a standalone webinar later on that I will be doing to help you with all your aspect needs. Hey there, someone says, hello, professor. Oh, you are the best. How long is the pre-course? The pre-course is going to be 5 weeks. So it's only 5 weeks long. And the reason for this is because initially we had the intention of having an in-person medical astrology intensive, which is what we did last year. And it was wonderful. And I was so happy and so delighted to see so many Oraculos faces in person with me, but also online because it was a hybrid. However, as many of you know, because I've said this before, whenever I start writing a book, and this is the book, whenever I start writing a book, everything else goes to hell on a jet ski. Everything else seems to crash and burn, especially at Oraculos. So I was very much invested in writing this book and getting this book finished by May of 2025 to sell this book at a major astrological conference that's held annually. And in the process of that, I guess we let the ball drop or didn't really promote the course as much as we should have. And as a result of that, we didn't really have the attendance that we wanted to have. So I said to myself, why don't we just teach the same intensive program? Why don't we just teach the same intensive program, but extend it over a 5-week period for the preliminary and also extend it over a 5-week period for the advanced? Whereas before it was 1 week, 40 hours. Now we're having 20 hours covered within the first 5-week preliminary course and 20 hours covered within the last 5-week advanced course. And when I say preliminary, I don't mean basic. And I think that that's what a lot of people get confused with. When I say preliminary, I mean that you should be able to leave and practice something. That is always my orientation at Oraculos. Whenever I teach somebody something, you should be able to leave and practice something in a tangible way. At the end of the first semester of our professional astrologers diploma program, which is called The first semester is called FOCA, the Foundations of Classical Astrology. The tangible transformation that our students receive is they are now able to practice horary astrology. Because for me, it makes no sense to spend money to study with somebody and all you learn is theory, but you don't actually learn application. So we have the FOCA program, which is our Foundations of Classical Astrology. But because I wanted the students to see those foundations in effect, I teach them horary astrology so that they can whet their astrological appetites and also so that they can start a professional horary practice if that's something that they desire. So at the end of this program that we have coming up, you're going to both learn how to assess the soul and psyche as a very foundational piece, but also everything that I know about basic constitutional assessment, a lot of which hasn't made it into this book. Now, as you all know, I write big books. That is a part of my problem in this lifetime. I write books that may be a little bit too big. I'll take it up with my therapist. But in the process of writing a book this big, I try to write all of the things that are salient and most useful. However, very often there's a lot of information that I have within my head or that I have within my heart that doesn't make it to written form because the book cannot be 900 pages. It has to have an end at some point. So there's a lot more things that I plan to go through and I plan to discuss within our upcoming medical astrology program that I haven't written down in the book form. But the beauty of having a book is that this book actually allows me to start from a much deeper place. I just moved my hand. As you see, I was blocking that. This says not for resale. This is one of the things that your book looks like when you submit your book to Amazon. They send you a copy that says not for resale, which is why I was trying to block that this whole time. But I don't think you all care. So this is a copy of the book, and that's what that gray band is on the front of it. So at the end of the preliminary course, you will be able to practice medical astrology and integrate principles of medical astrology into your larger client work. And more specifically, you will be able to look at your own chart and unlock all of the secrets that your chart has within it from a medical astrology perspective. So if that's of interest to you, then by all means, we start next week. We don't start next week. It is next week, even though it's 48 hours away, but we're definitely starting on October 20th. So what have we discussed thus far? We've discussed our understanding of the soul and psyche being of paramount importance. And then after that, we discussed this idea that the general constitution has to be assessed. Every major tradition of any indigenous form of medicine has a way of assessing our general constitution. So when we go to Ayurveda or indigenous Indian medicine, we find that there is pulse assessment. There's tongue assessment, there's eye assessment, there's palm assessment. There are all of these methods of assessment that allow practitioners to understand what's going on within their clients. Similarly, within acupuncture, we find a similar model. Within medical astrology, our starting point for the medical astrology reading is our understanding of our general constitutional assessment in general. And there is so much I want to talk about as far as this is concerned, but I can't talk about it now. So please do make sure to buy yourself a copy of the book, The New Western Medical Astrology, but also come and join us in class. Even if you can't make it live, you can still watch the recordings, which we are really good at uploading recordings right away when it comes to these larger courses. So I sincerely hope to see you there because this is the place where I'm going to be doing this teaching. Also, I think another piece is that I'm moving into my final year of teaching. I don't know if I said this to all of you, but I'm moving into my final year of teaching in this way because I've been teaching consistently since before the pandemic, since about 2015. I've been teaching tarot and numerology and astrology and all of these things. And I've been teaching on the weekends since about 2018, and I have not had a weekend to myself in a very long time. Today was a bit of a fluke because today I had an explosion of nature within my physical body that demanded that I don't do anything today. So for the most part, I just stayed in bed. However, this idea of teaching, I honestly feel as if I've done the lion's share in terms of my teaching practice, and I don't necessarily need to do much more. So I'm going to write these books. These books are going to be my 7 pounds of flesh that I sacrifice for the astrological community and that I sacrifice for the goddess Astrologia herself. But after that, I want to move on. And a part of my moving on is moving into other topics that are also astrologically based, but that are not the same as what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So lots going on. So the point is, if you want to study with me, now's the chance. And if you want to study medical astrology from this perspective, now's the chance as well. The next thing that we do after we take a look at the general constitutional assessment is we then go into this discussion of the morbificant combinations. Now, this word, morbificant combinations, is a word that I discovered from reading Richard Saunders' 18th century text on astrological physics. I most definitely will, Reverend. Reverend is saying to me that I need to record the classes and sell them on the website. That's exactly what we're going to do. And thank you for the idea. It's a good idea. It's a model I haven't really paid attention to for a long time. So the next thing is we'll take a look at the morbificant combinations. A morbificant combination is essentially any combination within our birth chart that can be tied back to the manifestation of disease. A morbificant combination is any combination within our birth chart that can be tied back to the manifestation of a specific disease, whether that disease is physiological or if that disease is psychological. This is what a morbificant combination is within the context of how we use that term at the Oraculos School of Astrology. And there are certain combinations within our chart that have the ability to be morbificant, whereas there are other combinations that really don't. And so to this end, we only prioritize the hard aspects and the quincunx and the declination table. There are many, many hard aspects to be found within our chart. And if you're only thinking conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, you'll miss the plot on something that is truly, truly, truly exciting. One of the things I was saying earlier is that we have our upcoming aspect series, which is going to be coming up. And that's going to be a larger extension of our Oraculos membership community. One of the things that I want to invest more of my time into is creating more community gatherings and creating more community events, basically. And so one of the things that we've started is Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. I'm going to go over to that page so that you can take a look at that right now. So this is called Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. Let me just flip this camera. And you can find this at the Oraculos website by clicking on the membership tab at the top. And so Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory is basically our membership community where we take a deep dive into the magical heart of astrology and astral divination. And so maybe you'll see yourself here. I know I see Rajashri here. So here we have some of our students. And basically, there are many, many things that I do that are astrology adjacent that I want to share with you all on a monthly basis. And one of the things is that, of course, we're going to be keeping up with the astrology forecast, but we're also going to be having an astrology research club. I recently applied or ran for a position in one of the astrological organizations, and the person said to me, Mychal, one of the things we want to do is astrology research, but nobody really wants to take on this job of astrology research. So maybe you should apply to be research director. And one of the things that has consistently happened at the Oraculos School of Astrology is that other people, other astrology schools ask me to teach things that I'm not even teaching my own students, because those other people see the value in those things, whereas in my mind, I'm always thinking, oh, but we haven't arrived there yet. So instead of being research director for somebody else's major astrological group, I decided to start our own astrology research club, which is something that we've done historically. But within this, we will be researching natal astrology, medical astrology, and predictive astrology. So we're going to be continuing the work that I've started within the books that I've written already, particularly the work that I've started in astrological research as far as medical astrology is concerned. So if you want to be a member and if you want to be a part of Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory, then check out our website at www.oraculosastrology.com/community. Marlene is going to put that tab, or going to put that link in the chat box for you all. And there's so much in here. There's so much packed, and we have up to 25% event discount on the majority of our events. We also have spiritual development classes, because one of the things that has been the pillar of my life, especially as a Kabbalistic tarot reader, is also tapping into sensitivities or spiritual sensitivities that also amplify the readings that I give. So we're going to be having that, as well as our lucid dreaming community, as well as our energy healing circle. So once again, the soft skills that aren't just the hard and rigorous astrology that also inform who I am are things that we're going to be doing. Then on the same page, we have our monthly masterclasses, which have been curated just for you. You can go and take a look at all of the masterclasses we have from November, which is next month, up to July. And so Marlene is going to put the community page in the chat box, not the upcoming events page, but the community page, oraculosastrology.com/community. And the monthly membership for all of this is $54 a month. You could cancel anytime. So you're going to be getting all of these things for free, this entire list of things for free, as well as these things for free, as well as these things for free as well. And things that used to be free at the Oraculos School of Astrology are not going to be free anymore. So if you want to dive into our membership community, then please make sure to become a part of our Oraculos Cosmic, our Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory, because I definitely want to see you there. All right, so we just spoke about membership, but now let's go back to this idea of the morbific combinations as a means of just ending where we are right now. So as far as the morbific combinations are concerned, all the hard aspect combinations within our chart constitute morbific combinations. And there's a lot of them. And they're not just your conjunction, your square, and your opposition. As a matter of fact, one of the most morbific combinations that we have within astrology is the quincunx. Now, I've been around the astrological community quite a bit to know that we have varying thoughts on the quincunx and what the quincunx is and what the quincunx does and why the quincunx represents adjustment and all of these things. And we've come up with a lot of theories regarding the quincunx. However, from an astrological perspective, there is no combination more morbificant within our birth chart than the quincunx. And that's a part of why we prioritize it so heavily within the context of our overarching medical astrology work, the quincunx. So if you aren't using quincunxes within your own astrological practice, you definitely should, because the quincunx, to a large degree, if you have a very tight quincunx between planets within your chart, that oftentimes carries the major brunt or the major emphasis of a lot of what isn't working harmoniously within your life, both within your life in general and also within the context of your physiology. And the description for all of these hard aspects, the description for every single one of these hard aspects, whether we're talking about the quincunx, the conjunction, the square, the opposition, the semi-square, the sesquiquadrate, the combination for all of these is found within this book, The New Western Medical Astrology, Pathways Towards the Cosmos Indwelling. So all of these combinations are described in the back of this book. I actually had a reading earlier, and I'm not sure if the lady who I met with is here right now, but if you are, hi. I had a reading earlier, and I saw within the chart that there was a very tight Moon Chiron, not quincunx, but there was a very tight Moon Chiron sesquiquadrate. And the sesquiquadrate, for those of you who don't know, pretty much looks like a large trine. It looks like a trine with 15 degrees attached to it. However, within a planetary-based astrology practice, that's a sesquiquadrate, and it's one of the most powerful hard aspects that exists. And so I said to her my normal Moon Chiron spiel, which is when we have Moon Chiron, it represents a maternal wound. It can represent that the mother didn't love you, the mother didn't want children, the mother said she wanted a boy, but she had a girl, the mother said she was going to commit suicide, the mother actually did commit suicide, the mother locked herself in the bedroom and didn't let you all know what she was doing to herself. The mother. There are always these harrowing stories with the mother. It could even be my mother breastfed all of my other siblings but didn't breastfeed me. And as a result of that, I feel as if I was a bit of an outcast because when she tells me that story gleefully, she doesn't realize the effect that that has on me. And I'm saying that because I do know somebody whose mother tells that story gleefully and doesn't realize the long-term effects it might have on her child, basically. And so that was the Moon Chiron quincunx. Now, or rather, that was the Moon Chiron sesquiquadrate. Now, if you aren't training yourself to specifically identify those types of hard aspects within your chart, they're going to go unnoticed. And in the process of them going unnoticed, you're going to miss out on large volumes of information that your birth chart has within it that can specifically point you in the direction of a depth of understanding about yourself, but also a depth of understanding regarding others. So I would say, as a homework assignment from right now, and especially for those of you who are going to be joining us on October 20th for our upcoming Medical Astrology Preliminary Program or our Medical Astrology Preliminary course. Once again, remember, if you can make it live, you can also just sign up and watch the recordings afterwards, because we are also going to be uploading those recordings on a daily basis. So what I want you all to do right now, just as a part of my community of Oraculites, is I want you to just look at your charts and identify the strongest, tightest, hard aspects within your charts. And then pick up this book, the New Western Medical Astrology, and flip to those combinations within this book and see whether or not those combinations are specifically descriptive of the ways in which your life has unfolded, basically. And I've heard thus far that about 9 times out of 10, it really lands and strikes a resonant chord within the hearts and lives of people. So please do that homework assignment, because that is pretty much the entirety of our medical astrology practice. Now, clearly there's a lot more to learn, but at its roots, having this understanding of the hard aspects and their relationship to concrete events is the primary basis for everything that we want to do as medical astrologers, because that understanding sets us up to see charts in brand new ways. And very often when I read the charts of people, they say to me, wow, Mychal, I've never seen my chart through that perspective. And all I'm doing is I'm using a full and a complete suite of hard aspects in my assessment of their natal chart, as I sincerely hope you do as well from this day moving forward. Now, Marlena is asking me to address 2 questions that were asked earlier. And thank you so much, Shauna. Shauna is saying that she'll sign up right after this session. Thank you so much, Shauna. Now, Lananda is saying, Mychal, in medical astrology, is the ancestry of the native also a consideration? For example, I have a Taurus husband and fruits and vegetables are his go-to. And if he eats any pasta, he practically falls asleep over the plate. And dairy takes him down. His Ancestry.com shows that he is 87% West African, and there was not a lot of wheat or dairy. I'm hoping to find these factors in the medical astrology class. For sure, absolutely. Now, I think when it comes to Black people in general, one of the things that we have to understand is that I think it is that 70% of Black people are lactose intolerant. And so there's that as a background for us as well. But as we know, there are certain people there are certain Black people who can chug a gallon of milk and nothing happens to them. And there are certain Black people who can't. And so I think that there is this larger context within our ancestry, within which our ancestry is important, because 70% of Black people are lactose intolerant. And at the same time, there is this understanding that from an astrological perspective, our natal charts show that even if there is already an ancestral intolerance, our natal charts can show a propensity that deepens that intolerance in a way that's ultimately unhelpful. So we're going to talk about all of this within the medical astrology program for sure. And that's a very, very great question. I think the same is true for people of Chinese ancestry, that there was a similar poll done that said that people of Chinese ancestry also tend to be lactose intolerant. One of the things I think is a problem is that we tend to think that lactose intolerance only manifests as going to the toilet, which, I don't know, maybe for me at this moment, that's how it's manifesting. However, lactose intolerance can also look like excess mucus buildup, excess congestion, and a feeling of general lethargy in general, a feeling of physical coldness, a slowing down of the metabolism. All of these things can manifest as elements or descriptions of lactose intolerance, a feeling of being constantly bloated as well. All of these can manifest as experiences of lactose intolerance. So my lactose intolerance doesn't show up through me going to the bathroom per se, but it does show up in terms of me forming excess mucus within my body. And I think that that's just as valid. And it is also just as reasonable a consideration that tells us, hey, there's something that you're doing that you're not supposed to be doing. Pay attention to that thing, because the body definitely will give us signs. Also, the ubiquitous question on orbs, schmorbs. Now, we know that orbs is a very touchy topic here at not just at Oraculos School of Astrology, but in the world in general. At Oraculos, I tend to teach an astrology that can be replicable. And I say this because I've seen astrology be taught for a very long time. And I've seen many people teach astrology in a way that cannot be replicated. And when we're teaching an astrology that cannot be replicated, we really need to sit down and have a deep conversation with ourselves, because a student might get caught up in the magic of seeing us read a chart, but if we can't effectively teach them how to replicate that magic, then the magic display itself is, as far as I'm concerned, masturbatory, because it doesn't actually let that other person take part in and share with us in the ability of replicating that magic within their own astrological practice. And so one of the things that I've done in teaching astrology and creating the school that I've created and in writing the books that I write is I focus on the things that are repeatable, and I focus on the things that have given repeatable, trustworthy results. One thing that I know for a fact of my human existence is that if you use an orb within the range of 5 to 7 degrees between any pair of planets, you will be having a concrete effect. Let me say that differently. If you use an orb of 5 to 7 degrees within the hard aspects, the major hard aspects now, not the other ones, not the semi-square and the sesquiquadrate, but if you use an orb of about 5 to 7 degrees between the major hard aspects, you will manifest a concrete event within the life of that person. It is hermetically sealed. It is law. It is an astrological fact of our human existence that if you are looking at a chart from the perspective of its conjunctions, its squares, or its oppositions, and you're using a 5 to 7 degree orb, or rather 0 to 7 degree orb, you cannot go wrong. Tight is right, which is something I used to say at the Oraculos School of Astrology, and then people tried to cancel me because they thought I was talking about something else. But no, tight is right. As far as the manifestation of real-world events is concerned within a person's life, tight is right. The tighter the orb, the stronger the aspect. And I would say this extends also to soft aspects, such as the trine and the sextile. However, soft aspects only tend to manifest things that are useful in terms of describing the personality of the native. Soft aspects create a background. Soft aspects create the wallpaper. The hard aspects create the manifestation of concrete events. And that's something that I stress at Oraculos. I don't really stress it in the second semester of our advanced natal training, but I definitely do stress it in predictive astrology. I also stress this in medical astrology, because when we're doing medical astrology, we're really only paying attention to our hard aspects. And the tighter the orb, the stronger the aspects. We were even going to make a shirt one year. I think it was this year. We were going to make a shirt and let it say, hard aspects, tight orbs. And then I was like, Mychal, that's the most Saturnian thing you could ever possibly do. And people already think that you're the manifestation of Saturn himself. Go eat a muffin or something and get off of it. But I probably should make that shirt. Hard aspects, tight orbs, because it's a powerful thing for us to remember, especially as we dive into the realm of medical astrology. Okay? So hard aspects, tight orbs. My homework assignment for all of you who've shown up here is to go and, you're very welcome. My homework assignment for all of you here is to go and take a look at your birth chart. Go and tally up all the hard aspects within a 0 to 7 degree orb. Then read what those hard aspects represent in the new Western Medical Astrology. And next to the new Western Medical Astrology, also have the combinations of stellar influences by Reinhold Eberton next to you. And see what those hard aspects represent, and you will find that a world of meaning unfolds within your life that no sign of the zodiac interpretation ever could. Okay? So that's morbific combinations, the hard aspects essentially. And from those same morbific combinations, we come to the fourth prong. So what are the prongs? Soul and psyche. Because if you don't know who a person is, you have no understanding of how they'll even respond to any health crisis they navigate within their lives. A Jupiterian person will bounce back from a health crisis in ways that a Saturnian person never can. So we have to first understand who a person is. This understanding of who you are sets the template for understanding how you react and how you respond to everything else that occurs within your life. Magic Spoon is saying, overwhelmed by how many I see already, but don't want to fear them. Don't fear them. There's nothing to fear. I think another thing that I've always taught my students at Oraculos, and this is definitely something we're going to emphasize in the upcoming Medical Astrology Preliminary course, which once again is starting on the 20th of October, and I'll take you guys over to the website so that you can see that. But another thing that I emphasize for my students is that, one, astrology doesn't really impact astrologers in the same way that it impacts everybody else. And initially when I said that as kind of like a Mychal Bryanism that I wasn't fully believing, but it still felt like something worth sharing with people, because ultimately, if we practice astrology enough, we should be able to navigate some of the astrological challenges in our lives in a better way. Then I discovered that Abraham ibn Ezra, who was a medieval astrologer, said that astrology does not impact Jews. Astrology does not impact Jews in the same way that it impacts everybody else, because everybody else gets rolled over and mauled by the wheel of time, whereas for Jewish people who live a life of such great devotion, they are actively in a process of burning the imprint of time within themselves every single day. So every single day that you do anything that is one of the commandments that you should carry out on a daily basis as a Jewish person, those things are actively used to burn the imprints of karma and to burn the imprints of Saturn/Satan within your life. Because what rolls us over? What completely throws us under the bus? The momentum that we've amassed around the things that we do unconsciously, isn't it? So if we're living a life of devotion, and so I've extrapolated from that it's not just Jewish people, but it's not just Jewish people who this applies to, but any person who is living a life of contemplation, any person who has a spiritual practice that connects them to an understanding of the world around them that is much larger than their specific relationship with that world from a physical perspective. Any person who has the ability to tap into a spiritual practice that is that expansive is a person who has the ability to burn the imprint of Saturn/Satan over their lives. And I'm only bringing up this Satan situation because I think that it's important for us to understand that there's a relationship between those words, Saturn and Satan. And the relationship is that, what do we consider Saturn to be? We consider Saturn to be the lord of the gates of matter, essentially the lord of this material world. And when we look at the tarot, the Kabbalistic tarot, we see that the devil card is also the lord of this material world. So we get stuck in a rut when all we can see is the material world. But as astrologers, astrology, which is fundamentally a Jupiterian practice, as astrologers, our astrology practice is meant to elevate us from only seeing the world in this very Saturnian reductionistic way. So that is that. So I'm saying all of that to say, don't be afraid of anything that's in your chart, because if you are an astrologer, you are already doing far more than most people around you to counteract some of the challenging karmic patterns that you find within your chart, as opposed to if you were just a person who was living life like everybody else, not knowing that there's a greater mystery behind and beyond the veil of the external world. Those people are the ones who get mauled over by the astrology. Those are the people who get ran over by the wheel of time. You are an astrologer, meaning that you are a conductor of the wheel of time. And a big part of how I'm going to be teaching you all to conduct the wheel of time this coming week is through our medical astrology preliminary course. I'm going to just turn this so that those of you on Instagram can see this as well. Our medical astrology preliminary course, which is on our events page. And we have two courses. This is the first course where I will be teaching you literally everything that I know about how to dive into the world of medical astrology and integrate that within your practice. So if that's something that you want to do, then by all means, please do join us. And then after that, we have our medical astrology advanced course, in which I'm going to be teaching you things that weren't covered in the first class, particularly my new insights on the morbific combinations and how to identify the primary morbific combinations that are within our charts. Because in a chart where, for example, someone said that I see hard aspects all over my chart, I don't know which ones I should be focusing on. I will teach you how to focus on the ones that tell your story the strongest. Because as astrologers, it isn't sufficient for us to just see everything and talk about everything. As astrologers, it's important for us to pinpoint the areas that are most problematic so that from those areas, we can guide our clients and ourselves into greater freedom and spaciousness within their lives and within our lives. So the final thing on our four-pronged medical astrology rubric, soul and psyche, personality, basic constitutional assessment. What is this vehicle? What's the make and the model of my vehicle? Should my vehicle take diesel? Some people's vehicles can't take diesel. Should my vehicle take only the 93 option? At the gas station, at the service station, I only put in the highest grade of fuel in my vehicle. I don't know if my vehicle could actually take something less, but I'm not going to risk the chance because there are certain masculine skills and abilities that I've not learned in this lifetime. And cars represent one of those skills. So anyway, I always put the highest grade of fuel in my car. But what am I saying? But the point is that we need to know what type of fuel can a person receive in this lifetime. What's the make and model of their physical body within this lifetime? What are some of the structural issues with their physical body within this lifetime, with their physiological body within this lifetime, with their psychological bodies within this lifetime? What are some of the things that needs to be recalled? What is God trying to call you back to heaven to fix before sending you back down again? I recently had to go into my car dealership because there was some recall about something in my car. And once again, me never having learned these lessons from my father, whenever you tell me something in the car has to be recalled, I think the whole car has to throw away. So I went down with the intention of throwing away my whole vehicle. And they told me something about the airbags, that if the car is stationary and on for longer than 4 hours, then the airbags won't deploy or something like that. And I was like, this could have been a text message. You all could have sent that to me in an email, basically. Because I'm never going to be anywhere in my car for 4 hours to the point where my airbags aren't going to deploy. Anyway, so they fixed it. But we also need to know those things about our physical constitutions. What part of us is hanging on the verge of catastrophe that needs to be addressed as soon as possible? You understand? So there are these things that we see from a basic constitutional assessment that is very important, or that are very important for us to assess within our own birth charts first, so that we can know how to address those things within both ourselves and also within others. And after that, we go into the morbific combinations. Now that we've looked at all the hard aspects to the luminaries and to the rule of the ascendant, what about all the other hard aspects that exist within our chart? The reality is there are some hard aspects that are going to be very powerfully impactful, and there are other hard aspects between planets that won't. Which ones will they be? Now, for now, your homework leaving this evening is just to go and find all the hard aspects in your chart, because we need for you to grow that skill. We need for you to sharpen those tools and find all the hard aspects and then go read what they mean in the book. However, after finding all those hard aspects, come and let's dive into the preliminary course, which starts next week. And let's organize those hard aspects, because there's nothing worse in an astrology reading where someone tells you every single thing that they can see within your chart without any sense of organization and any sense of direction. And one of the things that newer astrologers struggle with a lot is knowing how to organize their information. Not everything you see in the chart is going to hold the same level of importance. And that's a big piece. That's very important for us to know. Not everything you see in the chart is going to hold the same level of importance within that person's life. So we need to know, how do I look at the chart and specifically identify the things that will be most impactful on that person's physiological constitution. And then, after we've done all of that, the next and the final piece is for us to discuss with that person how those issues manifest within their larger sociological lives. Your Mercury-Pluto can manifest as you having some traumatic brain injury. But that same Mercury-Pluto can manifest as you coming from a household with an abusive father and an abusive husband. Your Moon Mars can manifest as your own tendency to excessive inflammation within your GI tract. Your Moon Mars can manifest as gastroesophageal reflux disorder, which is GERD or heartburn basically. But that same Moon Mars can also manifest as you growing up within a household where you may have witnessed domestic violence against women. And as a result of that, those women had to become tougher than they should have become within this lifetime, and they also forced you to be the same way. You may have Moon Chiron, for example. As many of you know, Moon Chiron is, for me, the cat's meow. I don't go home without the Moon Chiron. And for you, that might manifest as a constant gut wound, or as some major gut wound within this lifetime, some major gut trauma, some unhealable gut problem. But that can also very well manifest as the wound between you and your mother. And the fact that there was no maternal love between you and your mother, and resultantly, you found yourself feeling unmothered on the outside, and so your body didn't know how to develop a digestive system that was able to mother you sufficiently on the inside. So it's not just enough, as far as I'm concerned, to point out the physiological or the psychological manifestations of combinations. We also have to bring it back to the real world lived experiences of people. And then the question becomes, why? What does me healing my relationship with my mother have to do with me healing my relationship with my gut? What does me healing my relationship with my abusive father, my abusive husband, or letting go of the imprints of their abuse upon my life have to do with me turning around the story surrounding my traumatic brain injury? Venus Mars, excessive bleeding during menstruation. What does me dealing with the other side of Venus Mars, which is an overly inflamed approach to love in general, approaching love in a way where fools approach love, where fools rush in? What does me calming down something about my sexual nature have to do with me also attending to the larger reproductive health issues I find myself facing? All of these things are very vital questions. But the reality is our charts represent an unfolded cryptogram of our lives. And when we start to unfold and address and share healing with one part of the cryptogram, the other parts that are tethered to that singular part also experience that same healing. And so as far as I'm concerned, we may not actually ever heal our gut specifically by addressing the wounds between ourselves and our mother. But from an astrological perspective, it should be possible. Because the same combinations that represent that gut trauma are also the same combinations that represent that trauma with your mother. And why not extend healing into every sphere of our lives? So for me, this is why I believe this final sociological piece is a very important piece for us to integrate within our astrological practice, because it gives us a context for seeing I'm not just screwed up in terms of my respiratory system, I'm screwed up in terms of how I see and view reality. And as a result of that, people continuously take advantage of me because I'm always seeing the world around me through rose-colored glasses, and I'm not actually seeing the truth. And that might be manifesting on one level through my Mercury, Neptune, but inside of myself, that's manifesting as a respiratory system that is overly congested, a respiratory system where I have innumerable respiratory allergies, a respiratory system where I have a tendency towards sinus congestion, sinus infection, sinus sickness, chronic respiratory health issues. But that same combination has to do with how I approach the world around me and how I allow myself to see that world around me. Because maybe there's something in how I'm seeing the world around me that isn't actually in support of who I am as a person. Maybe in me being willing to prioritize somebody else's selfhood, I deprioritize my own because I feel as if intrinsically that person must care about me in the way that I care about them. And then I find that that just isn't true. And I keep on going through these cycles with me and my snotty nose and my box full of Kleenex. And I keep on going through that before I realize that there's a correlation between the respiratory health issues that I have and my larger lack of having proper boundaries between myself and others, and allowing people to jump over those boundaries in the same way as my overall respiratory system is not serving as an adequate boundary between external assailants, external pathogens, and my interiority. So all of these are things that we're going to be discussing within our upcoming medical astrology intensive. And I am so excited to be able to share this with you all within this way, because this is where I am. And I feel as if historically I've always allowed myself to be behind the eighth wheel. And I teach things that I don't want to teach because I feel some responsibility to teaching them, because I know that if I'm not teaching them in this sort of way, then it won't be taught in this sort of way. And I really want to leave that imprint within the astrological world. But I've done that, and I've written the books for that. And now I want for you all to join me at this new stage of my journey, which isn't really that new at all. But it's new in terms of the book has only just been published in 2025. But this book is built on a fortress of astrological research and the fortress of my own client practice. So I want for you all to come and join me in this way within the heart of my astrology, and see how you can automatically integrate these tools and these skills into your life in general. Once again, I'm entering my final phase of teaching, and it feels good, and it feels right, and it feels pure, and it feels within alignment with where I'm supposed to be at this moment within my life. And so things like this represent my last hurrah, as it were, my last stance and my last saying to the world, hey, I want to leave behind an imprint, or I want to leave behind a model for how this work can be done, so that you all who are coming either after me or alongside me can take this work even further. And so I'm so excited to be able to share this with you. And I'm so excited to be able to share this closing chapter of my life with you within the context of this medical astrology intensive. And once again, I'm not closing permanently because, like I said earlier, we do have Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. And that's a place where I really want to lean into my spiritual self. And I really want to lean into the spiritual side of astrology and the spiritual side of my own astrological practice, and things that I've been afraid to speak about before because I didn't know how they would impact how people received the astrology that I was trying to establish in a clear and a definite way. But I have already done that work. So now I want to introduce you all to the magical heart of everything else that I do. And that's what we're going to be doing in Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. And once again, you can sign up for that. It's $54 a month. You get our 4 classes within that month free of charge, a 25% discount on the majority of our other courses. You get our entire Oraculos library for courses that, and not even just for courses, but for the library of Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory before you joined, as well as the library after you join. You get access to all of these things. You get to be part of our lucid dreaming community, the oracles of the dreaming, so that you can begin to awaken not just the technical piece of what we do. We're so good at doing the technical thing as astrologers that we forget that what we're also doing is magic. And that magical piece is what I really want to bring to the forefront. And I feel that within my bones now more than ever before, that now is the time. And I'm so excited to share that with you all as well. So once again, you can check out our website at oraculosastrology.com/community to dive into Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. I'll share the screen once more so that you can see what that looks like. And all of the information is there for you all. And here it is one more time. So here we have Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory, our membership community, to take a deep dive into the magical heart of astrology and astral divination. I was hinting towards that when I wrote the purple book, Horary Astrology and the Natal Promise. And now that I'm coming to the end of my teaching career in the way that I currently host it, that's all I'm going to be focusing on. So if you want to dive into that, then by all means do so. Once again, these are our membership benefits. And there's just so much. Kabbalistic Tarot. Once we held a Kabbalistic Tarot diploma program, and I knew after that I would never hold that program in that same way again. But how I will hold that program is through the context of our Kabbalistic Tarot study circle, because that is the next sort of writing that I'm going to dedicate my life to when I'm done with these astrology books. So join in. I really would love to have you there. Once again, we have an up to 25% event discount on the majority of our events, the Oraculos, our spiritual development classes, which I've never shared before because I didn't want for people to think I was a blazing idiot or some weird person. But now we have the space to do that, and I'm so happy to do that here. Our lucid dreaming community, our energy healing circle, so much, so much, so much. Here we have a breakdown of everything that we're going to be sharing within the next, 9 months. And all of this is yours for $54 monthly, which is our full membership access. And once again, you can cancel that at any time. So I sincerely hope to see you a part of that, because everything that you may have been accustomed to us doing free of charge before the Oraculos School of Astrology is now in the process of shifting. And finally, the reason why we're here today is for this course, the Medical Astrology Preliminary course, which begins October 20th. And you can find this information over on our website on the upcoming events page. Thank you all so much for being here with me. Thank you all so much for supporting the work that we do here at the Oraculos School of Astrology. And thank you all for your commitment and your dedication and your loyalty to practicing astrology in a way that is event-based, and also practicing astrology in a way that elevates the standard of our entire community. Medical astrology is at the very forefront of that, because if you could look at a person's chart and speak about the medical events that impact their lives, there is nothing else that you cannot do as an astrologer. So I sincerely hope that you join me on this journey, and I'm super happy to have had you be here, a part of this journey up until this point within my life. So thank you all so much. Let us see what's going on in the comment section. Lots of thank you. So Duke is saying, how do these courses tie into the diploma course? I signed up for the focal course and want to go through the 2-year diploma program. So the professional astrologer's diploma program does not cover medical astrology in any sort of depth at all. We have 1 semester. After we finish our natal astrology semester, the next semester is advanced natal astrology and an introduction to medical astrology. That's all we do. So it doesn't cover the sort of depth or the sort of range that we will be integrating in this preliminary course. One of the things I say to my students is that when you study astrology, you should study with the intention of giving a 1-hour-long reading. In a world where I give a 1-hour-long reading, there's only so much I can fit within that 1 hour, isn't it? So when I study advanced natal astrology and an introduction to medical astrology, that means that I can now integrate 2 to 5 minutes of a medical astrology moment within my larger natal astrology reading. But I still have to get back and talk about their soul and psyche, their money, their family, their marital life, their love life in general, their career. I still have to get back and talk about these other things. The medical astrology preliminary course and our medical astrology training in general, it isn't just a 5-minute insert into your 1-hour-long reading. It allows you to give an hour-long medical astrology reading, which is different. And we have students at this moment who are enrolled in our specific medical astrology diploma program, and it's a completely different kettle of fish. So the difference, and thank you so much. So the difference that I would say is that our Professional Astrologers Diploma Program prepares you to give a 5-minute insert of medical astrology into your hour-long reading, whereas this medical astrology intensive, the preliminary course, essentially is preparing you to give an hour-long medical astrology reading that doesn't involve that person's money or their family or their relationship or their children or their career. It is specifically an assessment of the chart from start to finish in terms of medical astrology. Thank you for doing this even when you're not feeling well. Oh, thank you so much. I definitely wasn't feeling well today at all. And I actually do have to go and teach another lecture, another 65-minute lecture on medical astrology right now that's being hosted on the West Coast. It's for a conference that's happening today. So I'm pushing it right to the final moment. But just in concluding this, I do want to say to you all, thank you so much for showing up here today. I sincerely hope to see you in class. I sincerely hope to see you be a part of this final stage in my own journey teaching astrology. And I'm so excited for what the future holds, but I am definitely excited to share this program with you because this program is the culmination of everything that I've been doing for such a long time. And I cannot wait to meet you in the vortex of sharing this medical astrology training with you. Now that you already have the book, now let's dive deeper. Have a great one, everybody. I love you all so much. If you need anything at all from me, please feel free to send us an email at hello@oraculosastrology.com. I sincerely love and appreciate you all for being a part of my life, and I'll see you soon.